On 24th February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine and pushed Europe to its most challenging time since the Cold War. Further complicating this security challenge is Europe's dependence on Russia for its energy needs. The repercussion of this war is being felt across the globe. Today we'll try to analyze this energy relationship and what we might expect in the coming days. Russia is an energy giant. In 2021, it was the world's largest exporter of natural gas, the second largest exporter of crude oil after Saudi Arabia, and the third largest exporter of coal after Indonesia and Australia. In 2019, oil and gas accounted for 39% of the federal budget revenue and made up 60% of the total Russian exports, much of which is used to satisfy European energy demand. EU imports about 40% of its natural gas, 27% of its oil, and 46% of its coal from Russia, with Germany, the Netherlands, and Poland being the three largest buyers. It is imported via Soviet-era pipelines through Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, as well as Nord Stream 1 and Turk Stream corridors. The oil and gas supply from Russia is a crucial energy lifeline for the continent. It is used for winter heating as well as electricity generation and industrial production. Some EU states are far more dependent on Russian energy than others, with the level of dependence varying widely from one state to another. Germany is particularly dependent on Russian imports, which in 2021 accounted for 55% of its gas supply, 35% of its oil, and 45% of its coal. EU member states like Austria, Bulgaria, Finland, Hungary, Latvia, and others also rely on Russia for more than 75% of their natural gas imports. However, there has been a 60% drop in Russian gas deliveries since June 2021. And since the beginning of this year, Gazprom has shipped only one-third of the gas that it was supposed to deliver to European consumers via Ukraine as a part of a 5-year transit agreement. The resource has become a focal point of EU-Russia tensions, and EU's over-dependence means that imposing tougher sanctions on Russia risks putting a serious dent on Europe's energy security. With the beginning of the Russo-Ukraine war, European energy challenge has been transformed into a full-blown crisis. Even before the war, Russia had reduced the supply of natural gas, but after EU imposed sanctions on Russia and started sending weapons to Ukraine, Russia cut off gas to 6 countries and reduced supplies to the rest. It has left EU countries scrambling to fill their gas storage ahead of winter, when demand rises and utility companies draw down on the reserves to keep the homes warm and the power plants running. Gas flow into Germany through Nord Stream 1 were dialed back by 2/3 due to so-called maintenance issues. The EU's goal is to use less gas now to build storage for winter. Europe's gas reserves are only 65% full, compared with the goal of 80% by November 1. Lower export volumes through Nord Stream has made it extremely difficult for countries to achieve this target, but an extended shutdown could make it impossible. At the beginning of July, Germany's 3-decade-long trade surplus flipped into a deficit, driven by rise in gas prices. The country's wealth is created mostly by energy-intensive industries, and cheap Russian energy used to be a key source of the country's global competitive advantage. High energy prices are already threatening to cause a recession in Europe due to record high inflation. A complete cutoff could deal an even higher blow to an already troubled economy. Unrest has already been brewing, with strikes erupting across the continent as households struggle under the pressures of spiraling cost of living and inflation. Although the share of Russian imports has decreased from 55% in 2021 to 26% by June 2022, in part due to supply cuts by Russia. However, high prices means Russia's earnings have actually increased. According to an IEA report, since the invasion, Russia's revenue from exporting oil and gas to Europe has doubled over the average to $95 billion. Russia also used its energy revenue to accumulate around $630 billion in foreign exchange reserves to help cushion itself against Western sanctions. So by choking off gas supply, Putin could calculate that painful utility bills and a recession will undermine public support for Ukraine and increase the sentiment for a negotiated settlement in his favor. Even if revenue from energy export decreases, it would be unwise to exclude the possibility that Russia could decide to forego the revenue in order to gain political leverage. This coming winter will be a historic test of European solidarity, with implications reaching far beyond the energy sector. Russia's dominant energy position has provided it with potent economic leverage. Despite the EU's eagerness to decouple itself from Moscow's energy supply, Europe will likely remain trapped in this crisis until it can develop the infrastructure and legislation required for it. This can be seen from the fact that European payments to Russia for energy imports exceeded 27.9 billion euros since the invasion. To prepare itself for the coming challenges, EU has been scrambling to secure alternative energy supplies, especially LNG, from countries like USA, Qatar, Algeria, Azerbaijan and UAE. However, LNG alone can't make up the gap. The world's LNG export facilities are running at full capacity. An explosion at US terminal in Freeport, Texas that sent most of its gas to Europe took 2.5% of Europe's supply offline overnight. Thereby, other investments should be made in North Sea, UK's offshore waters west of Shetland, Norway's high Arctic, and Eastern Mediterranean. Conservation and alternative sources of energy are the only solution for the future, and countries should take adequate steps to address this issue. For example, Germany should bring back its coal plants and loosen environmental restrictions to build LNG terminals. Belgium should refrain from shutting down its available nuclear power reactors to prevent further increase in energy demand. France and Spain should pilot an agreement to transport Iberian gas across France into the European system. EU has already advised its member states to voluntarily cut their gas consumption by 15% over the coming months. The total bill for rescuing European energy market will easily be a conservative estimate of $200 to $300 billion. It doesn't cover the worst case scenario of Russia fully shutting down the natural gas supply. EU will have to decide on a big savings program, including public campaign to support it. In the end, taxpayers will have to bear the cost, either directly and immediately, via higher power and gas prices, or later and over the years, via higher taxes to pay for bailouts. The ripple effects of this energy crisis are already being felt across the continent. In Germany, Uniper, the biggest buyer of Russian gas, has all but failed. It recently asked the government for a bailout, the estimate of which is around 10 billion euros. EDF will have to be renationalized by France at a cost of at least 8 billion euros. These two are just tip of the iceberg. Many others are going to need, at the very least, state-backed loans and other government guarantees to survive. The state-backed loans aren't going to be trivial either. Earlier this month, the Czech government gave the country's state-controlled utility company CEZ an emergency loan of around 3 billion euros. That's for a company that serves only 10 million people. The German government has already given around 15 billion euros in loans to country's gas market operators to buy gas and fill up storage ahead of winter. Whether these loans will ever be repaid is another question altogether. Without the government help, many families will default on their bills, creating a debt problem for the energy providers. Either the state bails out the families, or it has to bail out the utility providers. If the utility company are allowed to pass the higher cost burden onto consumers, Goldman Sachs reckons that European households will pay around €470 per month for electricity and gas. That is 290% above the original cost. That's clearly unaffordable to many, and a bailout program will be needed to help such consumers. The problem can get a lot worse very quickly. Let's take Germany as an example. Due to Russian gas cut by about 60%, Uniper is losing €30 million every day from having to buy the same gas in the spot market. That's about €10 billion per year, roughly the cost of what the German bailout is. If Putin completely shuts down gas flow, the company's daily losses will jump to about €100 million a day, or about 35 billion per year. The government will have to provide that sum if it wants to keep people's power on. If Russia's prolonged disruptions continue, experts warn of a difficult winter, one of potential rationing, industrial shutdowns, and even massive economic disruptions. Thank you.